Good evening, Resident Evil fanatics. It's getting dark out there. I hope you don't mind that eager someone watching over your shoulder. I am here, once again, to share with you some more thoughts, theories, and insights on Resident Evil Village, and there's no better time to explore these than now. Last time, we investigated the potential roots of the vampires and beastmen of Resident Evil Village. Tonight, we will be exploring deeper meanings of Mia's folktale in the newest trailer, and some new insights on the cult's connection to the fetus Insignia. The Babadokia folktale we examined in our first analysis was intriguing, but it seems there's much more to this. In fact, more than we could have ever imagined, with more parallel folktales that provide further insight to Mia's situation. We will also examine the mantra which the cultists seem to chant so vehemently. Something from Marguerite Baker's altar in RE7 holds a special meaning that we haven't yet explored. There's lots to investigate here in this new trailer. Even though we were shown just a tad bit more than last time, it holds many secrets of its own. It is time to begin. Brace yourself, as this one's going to get creepy. Previously, we unpacked several concepts from classic Romanian folklore, such as the tale of Babadokia, which follows Mia's folktale quite closely. But beyond this Romanian tale, there exist several other tales with an eerily similar premise to the one from RE Village's newest trailer. If you are unfamiliar, no need to worry, as tonight's episode will cover the larger picture of this folktale's meaning. Many of these tales, Slavic, Romanian, and otherwise, bear multiple striking similarities. In nearly all of them, the mother and daughters have nothing but vile, bitter hatred for their stepdaughter, who is usually prettier than them. The mother's malice usually stems from her worry of male suitors finding her stepdaughter more attractive than her biological daughters. This wicked stepmother concept pervades many classic folk tales, even other archetypes of stories, such as Cinderella, and these tales focus on moralization. The unloved stepdaughter is typically given many arduous and even impossible tasks, such as finding fruits in the winter, which some form of god assists her with, and from there, the oppressed stepdaughter character prevails. All of these details are even more relevant now that the newest trailer has a Tim Burton-esque animation to accompany the story. We even see the girl kneeling down and examining the empty bushes, which again alludes to the absence of berries growing in the harsh winter, and finding them is an impossible task as these stories typically describe. But in Mia's tale, it seems that the mother and daughter are related by blood and genuinely love each other, rather than a spiteful stepmother type of relationship from the classic folktales. Keep this in mind, as it is very important. I'll explain later. There's one tale in particular that holds something very, very special. Out of dozens of similar stories, Mia's folktale in the new trailer holds the strongest parallel to this tale, and in a pretty dark way. As we navigate this special tale, keep in mind the symbolism of the dark winter as a force of fear, despair, and evil. This tale is known as the 12 Months. This is a Czech tale that follows a mother with two daughters, her own daughter, Helena, and her stepdaughter, Maruška. Maruška's stepmother and stepsister hate her, of course, as she is much prettier than Helena. It is pretty archetypal of a wicked stepmother and evil stepsister folktale. And so, Maruška's stepmother forces her into the snowy winter forest 3 times to seek strawberries, violets, and apples, threatening to kill her if she fails to find these things in a time of year that they never, ever grow. Of course, the harsh winter made finding these things impossible, but each time, a holy figure, named after a month of the year, grants her these things, just like how God is the saving grace in many other versions of the tale, including the tale of Babadokia. However, this time, I want you to pay special attention to this character instead. The mother's very own daughter, Helena, is infuriated at Maruška's successful retrieval of the final item, the apples, and insists on finding these delicious treats herself. Helena, full of determination, cries out, "I'll find that tree, and I'll pick the apples. I'd like to see anybody stop me." Her mother tries to restrain her, begging and pleading for her not to go out in such icy cold weather, but Helena broke free of her mother's grasp and proceeded into the forest deep, just like Mia had described. Remember, in Mia's folktale, she doesn't describe a mother and a stepdaughter, she simply describes a mother and a daughter, making Helena's relationship with her mother stand out as the true inspiration for the tale in the trailer. This is almost a direct parallel of this story at this point, but in Mia's tale, they seem to omit the stepdaughter and focus on the bond between the wicked mother and daughter, unless the stepdaughter is yet to be uncovered in Resident Evil Village. This has so many implications. The purpose of these tales, in a broad sense, is to illustrate the consequences of good and evil behavior in the eyes of God. Helena is the evil sister that ventures into the forest to spite her stepsister, which would imply an evil alignment for Mia's baby, and Mia herself too, since the mother is evil as well. After she enters the forest, Helena reaches the holy figures, the 12 months, herself, and she belittles them with her words. They cast a dark spell of icy wind, and Helena falls into a snowdrift. Desperately worried about her daughter, Helena's mother ventures into the freezing forest to search for her. As the icy wind moaned and the snow continued to fall, neither Helena nor her mother returned home. So if the entire game follows this story, Mia and her child would succumb to evil forces, represented by the divine powers in the dark winter forest, and possibly even die because of them. This breaking free of her mother's grasp and entering the forest part is inconclusive. This could refer to the child being abducted by Chris's unit, taken by village cultists, or even used for ritualistic experimentation, perhaps in accordance to the insignia that we keep seeing. What's even crazier is one theory by our very own Bob of ROE. He thinks that Mia is drawing our attention towards the mother and daughter in the tale so that we associate it with Mia and her own daughter, but she's using this as a red herring. There still seems to be some loose ends between Mia and Ethan, and communicating the events of the Baker Mansion in RE7, and little details that Mia deliberately leaves out. The quit being so paranoid, we hear her say, is definitely compensating for something. It's very possible that Mia is actually the daughter of this tale, and her mother is some darker figure, perhaps in the village. And maybe that darker mother figure is the one we hear chanted again and again by the village zealots, Mother Miranda. Let's discuss this mantra. If you listen carefully, they're actually saying, in life and in death, we give glory, Mother Miranda. Very, very reminiscent of the zealots praising Lord Sadler in Resident Evil 4, and in fact, this mantra sounds very similar to the Ganado's Morir es vivir chant, which translates to die is to live. The implied infant sacrifice of RE Village is an aspect that was practically omitted in RE4, as the children were likely killed as their bodies couldn't endure Las Plagas. But this time, the story seems to be fully embracing this. Going back to this insignia, there's something in Resident Evil 7 that looks and now sounds very, very similar to what is being hinted at here. Let's look back at the D-type experiments from RE7. These involved infecting a human fetus, namely a female fetus every time, with mold and then rapidly aging her to 10 years of age. These failed trial D-types eventually resulted in the first successful E-type, Evelyn. But the key here is the process through which they were created, as it seems to mimic the very concept of this insignia. A village that produces infants for the purpose of viral experimentation in their fetal stages. Whether it's the mold or something greater is yet to be discovered. Previously, we touched on how the brides of Dracula from Bram Stoker's novel devoured infants to stay alive, and they were supplied these infants by the Count himself. Given that the D-type experiments resulted in many failed trials, and thus dead fetuses, perhaps the village infants that do not live up to the cult's expectations, are fed to these three women who seem to parallel the brides of Dracula very closely. Going back to the insignia itself, there are a couple key pieces here which serve as parts of a whole, and it is time to examine the deeper meanings behind each part. Starting with the main portion of this sigil, the center is likely one of, or a combination of, two key concepts. The first, an infected fetus, similar to the aforementioned D-type infections on womb-ridden infants from RE7, and the second, a mandrake root. This was harnessed by witches to heal people, but it was very early to know its true medicinal value. It is a powerful hallucinogenic that would cause delusions and apparitions so strong that they would sometimes cause comas and even death. This would be a very fitting way for Capcom to scientifically explain the occult hallucinations of this game, and perhaps Ethan is tricked into ingesting this root through some type of drink. Romanian witches also consumed mandragora potions and inhaled mandrake fumes themselves for a variety of purposes, including summoning the devil. The human-like shape of the root itself inspired the beliefs that certain actions would impact real people, such as slipping a baby-shaped root under a woman's pillow to impregnate her, and using one as a medium to speak with the dead. The mandrake root's fumes were also believed to help witches with flying, which weirdly ties back together with the wings on the insignia, though the feathers actually mean more in and of themselves. So whether or not the D-type and E-type fetal experimentations play a role, the mandragora can serve as a way to explain hallucinations on its own. But in the RE universe, we'd think that this is some way to maybe harness the power of the mandragora into a new virus, or a blend with the E-type mold to cast stronger hallucinations than Evelyn ever did. The cult could also use the roots as a medium to communicate to the dead, meaning that this Mother Miranda figure could actually be a dead person that the cult seeks to reunite with. As for the feathers, they seem to be black crow feathers, and dead crows are actually present in this scene of the first trailer, as well with a bloodied horse. These crows are often associated with the coming of winter as well, which again is a symbol of darkness and death, which is interestingly very similar to the trope in Japanese folklore and Scandinavian folklore as well, where birds have the same ominous meaning. They are also arranged in a way that mimics tarot cards, a common tool that witches would use for occult fortune-telling, and there are, in fact, a couple formations that seem to resemble how these wings are arranged. For example, this is the Two of Wands, signifying domination over others, power, and authority. Whether this formation is supposed to mimic a specific card or simply serve as symbols of witches in general, this entire emblem fits the location much better now, knowing what its parts are composed of. The twigs underneath it form a little nest, supposedly for baby birds, which makes me believe the fetus or baby part of it must be significant, along with the mandrake root tendrils growing out of it. We've come a long way with this cult sigil, but there's more to be discussed, especially this old hag here. She chants the same mantra as the villagers, and her rich folklore holds many things of interest, including, weirdly enough, kidnapping and devouring children as well. She needs a closer examination, and perhaps that can be arranged. Tune in next time, and we'll do just that. So, do you believe the 12 months is the true inspiration for Mia's folktale? What does it mean for Mia's fate? What do you think of the similarities between the D-type fetus and the one we see in the cult's insignia? Let us know what you think in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this in-depth analysis video, feel free to check out my channel. The link is in the description. I do deep dives of Resident Evil and Devil May Cry lore and literature. Lately, I've been analyzing Virgil's poetry from Devil May Cry 5. Next time on Residents of Evil, let us dive deeper into the importance of this old hag. Until then, try not to become a Jill sandwich.